So glad to get out of that dang time travel machine.
Where'd you go?
I went back to the 80s to grab some of that good sports merch from my favorite defunct franchises. I spent my life savings on that machine.
You bought a time travel machine to buy sports merchandise.
Yeah, gladly.
You know you could have gone to 503 Sports, right? The website?
Yeah, no, I didn't think of that at all.
Yeah, they sell all sorts of throwback sports merch from leagues like the World Football League, XFL, UFL, and the Arena Football League, several others.
Oh, shoot.
Yeah, they sell hats, shirts, even custom jerseys from all sorts of vintage sports teams.
Oh, man, I spent like a lot of money on that time travel machine.
Well, look, listeners of AFL Rewind get 10% off their first order by using the promo code ARENAFAN at checkout. That might help you out.
Yeah, it does.
Go on over to 503-sports.com and get your merch today.
Do you know anyone who wants to buy like a overpriced time travel machine?
No, sorry, I don't.
Welcome to AFL Rewind, a look back at all things arena football, sponsored by Phenom Elite. I'm your host, Tim Capper. Well, this episode, we're going to do a little bit of a pivot in a way. But rather than have an executive on or a coach or a player, we're going to be speaking with a member of a team who deals with them on a daily basis, not necessarily as someone who is in a position of authority, like a head coach or another part of the coaching staff or an owner, but a gentleman who actually deals with them on a day-to-day basis and a week-to-week basis when it comes to clothing them and dealing with the intricacies when it comes to players and what they're going to wear each week. So this is an episode we're going to be speaking with a gentleman who was an equipment manager for quite a few years in the Arena Football League. His story was so extensive that we are actually going to be breaking this episode up into two different parts. So you will be able to hear the first part this week, and very shortly you will be hearing the second part of this very fascinating behind-the-scenes look at a team. So this episode, for these next two episodes, we're going to be speaking with Steve Smith. Again, he was an assistant equipment manager and also an equipment manager for quite a few teams in the Arena Football League. We really do hope that you like listening to his story. With this episode, it's somebody we have not had on the show before. And we're looking to hear a lot of the insight of what goes on behind the scenes with a person who isn't necessarily involved in the day-to-day operations, but in many ways he is, because he's the one. If you love how these teams look on the field, this is the gentleman that you want to speak with. On the line with us now is Stephen Smith. Hey, Stephen, thanks for joining us.
Hey, thanks, Tim, for having me, man. I've been looking forward to this for a while.
One thing I want to ask, I mean, obviously we could go right off the bat and start in 92 when you're with the Knight, but what I wanted to ask you is this. Was getting into being an equipment manager originally what you wanted to do? And then what pointed you in that direction when I guess we can say how you heard about the Arena Football League?
Well, I'll start with the second part of that question first.
Yeah.
Growing up in New Orleans, I grew up in, you're a CFL guy.
Yeah.
I was kind of like the weird kid because I liked watching the CFL and Aussie Rules football and Arena Football and ESPN when there was really nothing else. There really wasn't any other sports on TV.
Yeah.
And Arena Football always fascinated me, and it's someplace that it's a league that I had aspired to work in when I was a teenager. So, I got my start in equipment management, way before 92. I was helping out Tulane's men's basketball program because my dad and my father, God rest them, and the head coach at the time, Perry Clark, were good friends, and so I hung out around the program and. Kind of got my start in the business that way. And an equipment manager at the professional level at that point in my life is what I wanted to be.
Mm-hmm.
So, what many of my friends don't know is that like I actually worked the New Orleans Knights. The New Orleans Knights is nice. First tryout in the Superdome in February of '91.
Oh.
Okay. It was either February 9. It was somewhere around there. And they had put down parts of the field that we used was actually part of the Superdome's baseball turf, because they had 3 different sets of turf. So they had 2 football fields. They had one that the Saints and Tulane played their home games on.
Okay.
There was one exclusively used for the Sugar Bowl, and then there was the baseball field. And a lot of people may not remember that the Superdome used to be configured for multiple sports. Well, prior to Katrina in 2005.
Right.
So our game field that we played on with the Knight was actually the center field portion of the baseball field. And so when we did the first tryout at the Superdome, they painted the field, they painted lines on it, and put it down like in what the Superdome's basketball configuration would have been at the time, to see what it would look like. And so we did our tryout in there. It was really crazy because it wasn't open to the public. And Eddie Kayat was the head coach that year. And so I got to meet Coach Kayat and Coach Jackson, who was offensive coordinator. And I was supposed to like go to work training camp for the night in '91. The morning I show up, nobody's there. And I was just like, okay, well, I got a little disillusioned. And so 92 rolled around and I tried it again and went to the Knight's office out in Harahan. And at that point, when we started out, we were on Jefferson Highway, in River Ridge, not Harahan. And, walked in and said, hey, I want to try to help last year. A couple people in the front office remembered me. And so I went out, and the next day I was working training camp, and that's the rest, as they say, is history.
So you tried to do it in '91, and you're saying nobody was there. I mean, how did it make you feel? Did you feel that the AFL was a fly-by-night thing? Because remember, at the time, there was no indoor football, really. I mean, arena football had been around since '87. It's a new thing. What were your initial thoughts when you thought you could try out to do the equipment manager stuff in '91 and nobody be there?
Well, 18-year-old me was a little disillusioned.
Okay.
This was my first exposure to professional sports.
Right.
And I woke up. I went to bed early the night before, and woke up in the morning with all the fervor in the world. And the crazy part was I wasn't so good academically, so my opportunities to get my driver's license didn't occur until I went to college.
Okay.
So I was still in high school at the time. I was entering my senior year in high school, and my dad took me. My dad took me out to and we just kind of sat around and waited for nobody to show up, and we're like, okay, well, let's go home. And I got my own car a year later and tried it again while I was a student at Delgado Community College. I was the equipment manager and the athletic trainer there for the department. And, got the job like about halfway through basketball season, just, out of pure, I guess just tenacity, because I just kept going after it because it's something I really wanted to do. I mean, I put it on the list of my goals, and was to work in professional football as an equipment manager. And, I didn't think I'd be able to get it done at 19, but, there I was, 19 years old, man, short little fat ugly Steve, standing on the sideline, and I'm at practice at John Curtis High School going, what the hell am I doing here? It's crazy, man. But, it was a really great way to start. It really was. I mean, we had a really good coaching staff. Walt Hausman, who I think if the listeners really know their arena football history. Mm-hmm. So, Walt was on that staff. Ken Meyer, who was an offensive coordinator, he worked for the 49ers with Bill Walsh, and under Chuck Knox in Seattle. He was our OC. Brian Gardner was our defensive coordinator, and Brian actually had a cup of coffee in the AFL with Pittsburgh, I think in 88 and 89 before getting hurt. Ted Heath, he was our line coach. He came to us from Saskatchewan in the CFL. And then Walt had just retired from playing. What a lot of people may not know about Walt is that he was actually on the Saints strike team in 86 and then stuck around on the practice squad with the Saints in like 87 and 88. Oh, shut up, Siri. Sorry.
It's okay.
My iPad from work is just real sensitive. And then, Walt was good enough to, he called on with the night in 91, and I think he got a back injury or something that prevented him from playing. So we made him a coach, and after Eddie and after Coach Kaya, his staff left and Vegas came on, or Vince Gibson, I should say. God rest Vince. I love Vince to death. He was great to work for. Stevie! I just remember hearing him screaming my name across the practice field every day. He's a great guy. I mean, me being a diehard Tulane fan, I'm like, oh my God, I get to hang around Vince Gibson like every day. Vince, he had such a great career coach in college football, and then went on to run a very successful travel agency with his son. But Vegas had no idea about arena football. He had none. So, hope that answers your question.
Oh, yeah, for sure. What I wanted to ask you is this, and I'm sure people, now that you've given your history, how you got the job in New Orleans in 92, what happened to the guy in 91?
So I was actually the assistant in 92. The guy I worked for was a little skinny Creole guy in Louisiana Creole, not Haitian Creole, but little skinny Creole guy by the name of Keith Sumas, who lived out in New Orleans East and went to Abramson High School.
Okay.
And then Southern Miss for his undergrad. Keith was the assistant the year before.
Okay.
And then I can't remember the guy's name. I think the guy's name was David or something like that. It was Dave something. And God, Tim, you're really making me go back in my memory warehouse and pull all this stuff out, man. So Dave was the equipment guy and the trainer the year before, and Keith was his assistant.
Okay. And
Dave left, and they elevated Keith to the head, and Keith needed an assistant. So they hired me. They paid me $500, and I had to pay my own travel expenses, which I didn't mind at the time because I got to stay in some nice hotels for free when we went on the road, especially to Orlando.
Of course.
But yeah, it just happened that way, man. And it was by the grace of God and just pure luck, I guess, man.
That's cool. Now, I'm sure, people who, as I mentioned at the top of the show, people see their team on the field. They see how good they look, and they may not think anything of it. So for those who are uneducated when it comes to the life of an equipment manager or assistant equipment manager, before we continue on with your career, give us a little bit of a Cliff Notes version of what a, not necessarily a day, because we know it's more than a day, but what is a life like for an assistant equipment manager for a pro team?
It is long days. Start off first off. Mm-hmm. It's long days. Especially, it's easier for one person to do it. Mm-hmm. With a smaller team, like the size of the teams in the arena football in the AFL and AF2. It's kind of more difficult when you get to teams of larger size, like college football, in the NFL. The NFL, I mean, the equipment guy, the equipment staffs, there's one head guy and two assistants that are full time, and then you have a cadre of just either seasonal or game day assistants that help out with the load in and load out. But it's long days, man. I mean, the travel's a lot because, especially with the Arena Football League, the way it was, it was a 16-week season, and if you played like we did in Tampa in 2001, where you played 2 preseason games in those years, and we split. We had a home when I was in Milwaukee in 2000. We had 2 home games in preseason, but in Tampa we had a home game against Orlando, and then we went to Buffalo to end the preseason. And to have to pack all that stuff for one person and try to prepare for all contingencies is not bad, but it's a lot of long days, it's a lot of long nights, but it is. You get to be with a group of men, and in some cases women, it's depending on what sport you work in,
Mm-hmm.
but in this case men. You get to be with a group of individuals, men and women, who are in the front office, your teammates, the coaches you work under, and you get to build bonds with those people that last a lifetime. And you get to see the product of your hard work on the field.
Right.
The players work the players work hard. The coaches work hard. Equipment staffs and athletic training staffs. We work just equally as hard. Just people just don't see us unless something happens.
Right.
I was very fortunate in the fact that I got to do it for almost 2 decades. Oh, just over 2 decades.
Yeah.
Before moving into coaching full time now. I wouldn't trade it for anything, man. Especially my years in the AFL and the Deuce. I mean, as somebody who grew up loving arena football and having the opportunity to work in it full time like I was able to for, the seasons I was able to, it was really a great opportunity. But to kind of get back to the equipment, it's getting to choose uniforms and helmet colors and helmet styles and shoulder pad styles and assisting players with trying to get gear. I mean, making deals,
Yeah.
Packing for road trips, driving equipment. I mean, loading planes, unloading planes, I mean, it was, it can be tough. I mean, if you're not built for it, that's the crazy thing is like, it's just like any other calling in life. You don't find it, it finds you.
Right.
And then once it finds you, it kind of grabs you with both hands. And as they said in The Last Starfighter, it kind of grabs you with both hands and holds on tight, and like I said, man, I mean, I wouldn't trade it for the world. I had a hell of a run, and to do what I got to do for the time I got to do it was just absolutely amazing.
I can imagine. Now, did it bother you at all that technically, the night had no owner? Technically, did it bother you at all, or were you just really concentrating on trying to make the team look as good as they did?
Well, I'll put it this way. If I knew then what I knew now, I would have been completely unhinged. But so the whole story about the Knights ownership is this. So Sports Management Group is an international, if you're into sports ownership and management
Mm-hmm.
and arena management. So SMG operates arenas and venues around the world.
And many in New Orleans.
They're also and many in New Orleans. Actually, just about almost every single one in New Orleans,
Exactly.
except for Lakefront Arena.
Yeah.
So SMG, the night originally did not have an owner. So SMG decided that they were going to own the team for a year and see how it goes. Right. So the attendance actually exceeded their expectations, and they were very well managed. Bill Curl, who was a gentleman who's not with us anymore, I believe he's not with us anymore. Bill is a great guy. He's a Tulane guy. I got to know Bill a little bit in my years at Tulane. Bill was kind of like the de facto general manager.
Okay.
And he let the folks at the Superdome did all of the business side of it, sales, marketing, all that. And then Coach Kai and his staff handled all the football operations. And it was very well ran. There was an air of respect between the fans and the organization and the organization and the Superdome itself. And then they found an owner, and that guy's name was Mike McBath. So Mike McBath at the time, he was originally from Buffalo, New York, played at Penn State under Joe Pa. He was a linebacker there, the 70s, early 80s. I can't recall which, but Mr. McBath was in finance, and he always wanted to own a professional sports team.
Right.
So the night were up for sale, and so he bought the team. Him and SMG came to an agreement in concert with the Arena Football League. And so Mr. McMath purchased the team, and they had a couple of silent partners, or not really so much silent, but just smaller stakes in ownership. And God, I can't remember for the life of me. I can't remember the guy's name. The guy that founded Fat Tuesdays Daiquiris, right?
Okay.
So he owns all of the New Orleans original daiquiris locations. It has a company called Jazzland. I don't know if he still does, but had a company based in Harahan called Jazzland Distributing Incorporated. Now, Jazzland, if I remember this correctly, they had a warehouse in Elmwood, which is kind of like an industrial part of Metairie, which isn't too far from where we practiced, and it's about 20 minutes from the Superdome.
Right.
That's where like all the cups and all of the drink mixes and everything would get distributed centrally out of that location to all the New Orleans original daiquiris locations.
Okay.
So he had just started opening up franchises in Orlando and I think down in Mexico. And so he was a small owner. He was a small stake owner in the team. In week 7 is when the team was taken by the AFL out of Mike McMath's hands. Now, the way I found out about this was, so I had the Zach Morris brick phone. Okay, that's how cool I thought I was at the time. I had this big old. We were one of the first professional sports teams in Southeast Louisiana at the time in the New Orleans area to sign with Bell South Mobility. So part of the deal with Bell South Mobility is that the team got cell phones. And the only cell phone that they had at the time was the big Zach Morris brick phone.
Yeah.
And I thought it was cool because I watched Saved by the Bell, and I'm like, I got the same phone that Zach Morris does. So I'm like, wicked cool, right? So I'm at a sporting goods store. We're doing a public appearance, and it's Bruce Clark, Ted Garcia, somebody else, and myself, and I'm going to represent the team. And so I get a phone call, and we were hearing rumblings that day at practice, right, about this occurring. And we kind of saw it coming because less and less money was being spent when we were on the road. Like when we had our 1992 opener, it was in Charlotte against the Rage, and it was the Rage's first home game, I think, in their franchise's history.
Yeah.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And so it was at the Charlotte Coliseum. Great crowd. They had about 18,500. They sold like 2,000 tickets, but they had like probably one of the largest walk-up crowds in the history of arena football. Like the top, the bowl was like 2 levels, and they had the top of the bowl like curtained off.
Mm-hmm.
And they had to drop the curtain, I'll put it that way. And Denny Petro, God rest him, who was a good friend of mine, after another indoor football experience. Denny DP was the GM there. He and I swapped stories about that in Miami in 2005. But we stayed in a really nice hotel. We got fed really well. And then as the season progressed, like we were still staying in nice hotels, but we weren't getting fed as much, and our per diem started dropping off.
Right.
And then in week 7, the league took over ownership of the team, and that's when everything changed.
Okay.
And that's when things really started going south for us.
Okay.
So it kind of, in seeing like how things were ran, like the league, I don't want to say like they ran us into the ground, but we pretty much did it on our own without any help from the league.
And it's interesting that year also was the same year that the whole LA Wings thing occurred, where the Arco Arena in Sacramento owned the team that year. So it's almost the exact same type of thing, if I remember correctly. I think it was 92.
Yeah.
What was it like being an assistant equipment manager the year following Zubaz? I have to ask, because that's come up so much in recent days with the games just popping up over on the Arena Football TV YouTube channel. It's like,
man.
I mean, you go from Zubaz and you come in 92. When you started, did you think you were going to be using the Zubaz stuff? Or, because I think it was only a 1-year thing with Zubaz, but maybe you can shed a little bit of light on that.
Yeah, so for those who don't know, so Bike Athletic struck up a deal with Zubaz. And so Zubaz was a leisure wear company that the guys who founded the company were like into weightlifting and stuff and wanted comfortable clothing. So they did a licensing deal with the NFL. And so Bike picked up on this deal, on this trend. And so they were like, hey, you know what would be cool? It's like if we did Zubaz uniforms for a select number of teams in the AFL. Well, it just so happens that like they only had 4 patterns that they used for NFL teams. And it just so happened that those 4 patterns matched teams in the Arena Football League. And it just so happens that the New Orleans night, we used the same Zubaz pattern that the Chicago Bears did. Tampa Bay used the Giants, and Orlando used the Falcons, but they never wore the uniforms. I can't remember somebody else used.
Albany.
I think Denver used it. Oh, Albany, that's right. Albany did.
And Denver
and they
also.
used the big. Yeah. And Denver also. So Denver was the only team that wore the Zubaz that did not match an NFL team. It actually matched the Golden State Warriors, I think, at the time.
Okay.
Albany wore the Bengals. That's right.
Oh, okay.
So, and I knew about it, and I was like really, really hoping that I would be able to come in and like we have these Zubaz uniforms, and I walk in, and like, hey, are we wearing the Zubaz uniforms? No. Oh. So I go walk in the equipment room, which was a classroom at John Curtis Christian Academy. So I go walk in the classroom where our gear is. I'm like, well, where are the jerseys? Oh, the players took them. What do you mean the players took them? Yeah, the players took them. The home and the away. We had none of the jerseys left, but we had tons of pants. So we used the Zubaz practice pants we used the Zubaz game pants for practice, and we had some of the gear left over. The funny thing is that none of it was like embellished, like what we say in the business, or none of it had logos on it. So it was just all like the orange, navy, and white, Zubaz on it.
Yeah.
So we didn't have any hats. We didn't, or anything like that. And I was, I'm a hat guy. I got about 100 or so at my mom's house in New Orleans and another 50 here where I live in South Carolina now. And I grabbed a hat, and that was my hat for the season. That was my hat for the season. And the funny thing is that I think up until 2008 or 9, my mom still had the Zubaz pants that I gave her. I gave a pair of Zubaz pants to my brother. He threw them. I think he threw them. He lost them in Katrina. A pair to my dad, which I think he wound up just throwing away because he thought they were ugly as sin. And my mom, because my mom just keeps everything, and I think she finally gave them up in like 08 or 09.
Okay.
But yeah, the Zubaz. Oh man, well, I would have loved, Tim. I would have loved for us to wear that Zubaz stuff. And I got to later on, if I remember, I got to tell you the story. I got to tell you the story about trying to. I asked Markham. I worked for Tim Markham at Tampa Bay. God rest him in 2001.
Yeah.
And I wanted to bring the Zubaz back so bad from the storm, and he said, "Absolutely." He's like, "Steve, that is the most god awful looking stuff." I can't curse, so I'm gonna really try not to curse, so you don't bleep anything. They're like, "That's the most god awful stuff I've ever seen in my life. I hated those uniforms. Like as soon as he got the job here, I hid them things way deep, and it ain't gonna happen."
And well, the funny thing is Markham, and we're skipping ahead a little bit, Markham didn't have to deal with them because he was in Detroit. Detroit didn't wear them, and the only, his former team, the Denver Dynamite, did. So
yes,
he never really had to deal with them, so to speak. So it's
no, but he could not. Tim hated that. He hated that whole uniform program.
Even with them bringing that stuff back today now, Steve, it was so bad it's good, and that's as we know with clothing styles, stuff comes back and disappears again. So it's
I would love to see somebody try to like reinvent the Zubaz uniforms for the arena football teams.
Mm-hmm.
That would be so awesome. I mean, I know it's never going to happen again. But I mean, you got this. It's just with all of these people who do uniforms and stuff, like in different parts of the world.
Oh, for sure.
Somebody has to like find a template for this and go, dude, make this and sell it. You're going to make bank. You won't even realize it.
Well,
and then we'll just bring back porthole mesh. It'll be awesome.
And with oh god, I'm lucky enough to own an Albany Firebirds away Zubaz, and yes, that mesh, holy, yeah, that mesh.
Yeah, porthole mesh was really, really big in the 80s, in the 70s, 80s, and parts of the 90s. And I'm so glad as a former equipment guy, like one of my equipment manager days, I am so glad that porthole mesh went away, because man, it looked all types of awful. And like, if you watch the videos like on YouTube on Arena Football TV, like if you watch those videos, you realize, God, they look great, but they look god awful.
Yeah, they do. And I think at that time, and you would know this, being the equipment manager, weren't those considered the quote unquote tearaway jerseys?
No, those were not tearaway jerseys.
Okay.
What they were shimmel cut. And what a shimmel cut is it's basically it was waist length. So those jerseys were not meant to be tucked in. And like because the material was because of the way the material was made, if you pulled on it at a certain strength, the jersey would just come right off.
Okay.
Because it was so poorly put together.
You being a part of the equipment manager family, you've had to deal with obviously technology that people look back to today, and you're like, how did you deal with it? Now, the only thing that could really bring up to that, because it said you were the ones who were outfitting the players with all their uniforms and stuff and equipment, was dealing with Max Pro helmets, because Max Pro at that time was a major. It was a major, advertiser and equipment provider for the league.
Let's not forget the Kasemco shoulder pads.
Yeah, those two.
Those two. Oh my God! Let me tell you what, dude. Thank God. Okay, thank God that Noxie decided. Noxie is like the national board that certifies athletic equipment,
right.
Like protective equipment, helmets and everything, right?
Yes.
Apparently something happened with Max Pro after the 1991 calendar year, and anybody who reconditioned football helmets in the country were not allowed to send those helmets back out because the liners in them was so bad. Here's the crazy thing. The polycarbonate that was used to comprise the shell was really, really good. It was the inside of the helmet that was really, really, really bad. And like just recently, like I had the last New Orleans Night helmet that I put together until I moved here 2 years ago, and it's now owned by a friend of mine who used to work for the Saints, who was probably one of our biggest New Orleans Night fans,
nice.
Unbeknownst to me.
Nice.
But that helmet was really, really bad, and the Kasemco pads that we used, that we barely used the Kasemco pads because they were just so bad. Yeah. Oh God, those were horrible.
Yeah,
it was like
I think if anybody who's bought one
guy.
of the Max Pro helmets, because there's been a few that have popped up on eBay in the past couple months and stuff like that. If you see the underside of them, you look at today's helmets, it's like night and day. It's like night and day.
Bad.
So
it's almost as bad as those bike helmets that they gave us in 2000 and 2001.
Oh, really?
They're almost as bad.
Oh, man. The Arena Football Hall of Fame has returned, and we want you to become a part of the family. Introducing the Arena Football Hall of Fame Patreon. Whether an All-Star or a Hall of Famer, our reasonably priced tiers each have their own exclusive perks. Early access to the AFL Rewind podcast, honorary selection committee member, and much more. Help us build a Hall of Fame we'll all be proud of. Head to patreon.com/AF Hall of Fame to join. Obviously, something brand new to you, being with a pro franchise and stuff like that. I know the season didn't go all that well, but doesn't mean, even though the team went 0-10, doesn't mean there are a lot of stories to tell. For you, what was it like being part of a pro franchise, first ever road game on top of that? You're talking about Charlotte before. Are you able to get jitters, or is it because you're just so concentrating on getting the team to look good?
I was just caught up in the moment.
Yeah.
I mean, you realize that, for me, having never worked in pro sports, up until that point, I'm 19 years old. I'm still living with my mom and dad out in Metairie. I'm going to college at the same time. I just got done with a back-to-back basketball and baseball seasons. I was still affiliated with Tulane's men's basketball program at the time. And I was just like another thing to roll into. And it was just another experience to have. And, working with Tulane, we got to play some really big games. I was kind of used to being in the moment. I mean, I was at Memphis,
Right.
Penny Hardaway's. I was on the bench when we played at Memphis, Penny Hardaway's senior year, there for his senior game when we shut him down. I was in Fogelman when we beat Louisville in overtime when we were in the Metro Conference. So being in that moment, being around Tulane's men's basketball program, growing up, from like 16 to 19, kind of prepared me for that moment. I guess a lack of speaking.
Mm-hmm.
But you're really not. The thing about it is like for me, being a sports fan and being a fan of arena football, and being on the bench, my first game, our first exhibition game in '92 in Lafayette at Cajun Dome against the Thunderbolts, and seeing Major Harris, a guy that I saw on television play quarterback at West Virginia, and now here I am. I'm standing on the same field with him. I'm like, dude, is this really happening? I mean, like, okay, this is really happening. And then just the game starts, and then it's the game. You just kind of get into the flow of it, and it kind of the preseason kind of prepared us because we didn't play a home preseason game in '92.
Right.
We played our first one in Lafayette at Cajun Dome against Cleveland and lost by 20. And then the second one we played in Mobile a week later at the Civic Center against Orlando and beat them 75-72 in overtime.
Wow.
And that was the last one in franchise history.
That's
but I
true.
do remember beating Rusty Russell. I do remember being Rusty Russell and who was the big tall guy that played O-line, D-line for the Preds? Because he was like literally a whole foot and a quarter taller than I was. And I'm 5'8".
Yeah.
And,
I'm not sure. I'd have to look at their roster.
Yeah, I'd have to. If I saw the name, I'd probably remember. And if he's listening to this, I sincerely apologize. He probably knows who I'm talking about too. But playing in Mobile, and and those experiences of loading, unloading the bus, setting up a locker room, setting up a football locker room. It was great. And there were a couple of times like in that season where Keith just let me, he's like, you got this? I'm like, yeah, I got it. And I set the locker room up and decided what we wore and everything like that. So what many people don't know is that we were Oregon with the Knight in '92.
Yeah.
We were Oregon before Oregon was Oregon. And here's why.
Okay.
We were the first team in professional football history that had 3 game uniforms.
Really?
Yes. So we had a purple jersey. We had an orange jersey,
Yeah.
a navy jersey, and a white jersey. And then we had navy pants and white pants. And then we had white, navy, and orange socks. And Keith always let me pick out the color combination. So if you go back and if ever the videos if ever just more than just the video of us playing in Orlando, our last game in franchise history, which I'm almost over 30 years later, and I'm still mad about that game. But anyway, I digress. I'll talk about that game in a few minutes.
There's the home game versus Cleveland is also on YouTube.
From
92.
It is. I just have it's right. That was the first one I found.
Yeah.
And I can't find it, but if I can find it again, it'd be awesome. At some point, I don't know if it was Cleveland or I can't remember if it was against Cleveland, Tampa, Detroit, Orlando, where the door fell on top of me.
What?
Yeah. So
are we talking the locker room door?
No, the door to the field.
Oh, the door to the field.
Yes, because the walls of the Superdome were wooden, and then they were bolted down to the floor.
Oh man.
We didn't have hockey boards in the dome.
That's right.
So I'm sick because even to this day, like it doesn't matter whether it was any type of indoor arena football or whatnot. If I was the equipment manager, I always worked the door. Okay. it's one of those things. Every equipment guy, no matter what league he's in, if there's an equipment guy on the team, he works the door. Okay. So here I am, I'm holding the door. I'm standing by my door. I open and close it, whatever. And there was a play. It was coming like we were going away from our bench, from the door. I think we were going away from the end of the bench that I was on, because I was on the far end closest to our locker room. And the play was coming from the right side by the fans and then coming over to the left. And somehow our guy got tackled into the door. The door came off the hinges and was on top of me, and they were on top of me for about 2 seconds.
Oh, man.
I got up, and they're like, you okay? I'm like, yeah, I'm fine.
Wow.
Are you sure? I'm like, dude, I'm fine. Put the door back on the thing on the wall. Let's play. Let's go. You know, I really like, at some point I'm going to find that video and people are just going to be like, hey, that's the idiot that, it's the idiot the door fell off. Was that guy on the arena fan thing? But yeah, man, I mean, it was, to get back to your question, it was, what was crazy was like my first game when we played our exhibition game against Cleveland, and Dave Wyndham and them, they're coming off of their 0 season in 91.
Yeah.
And they got a win, and it was their first win in almost a year and a half, like on the calendar. Well, they were excited. They act like they won the Arena Bowl, right? And just like I knew about the game, and like Walt knew about it. Brian did, but our other coaches had no clue about anything about arena football. They had never been to an arena football game, and quite truthfully, neither had I.
Mm-hmm.
I'd always just seen it on television.
Right.
So my first in-person arena football game was in April of 1992, in Lafayette, Louisiana, at Gainesy Dome against the Thunderbolts. And Vegas, God rest them, had no clue what was going on. Like, it's professional football, so it's a preseason game. It's a preseason game, not a preseason scrimmage. And so Vegas thought when it got down to halftime, that we weren't going in the room, that we were going to continue playing like off a script. And like Vegas, this is a game. He's like, well, I thought we were going to run plays and they were going to run plays, and like it's college. And we're like, Coach, this is not college football. This is pro football. Well, I realize that, but I mean, Coach, we mean go to halftime and make adjustments, man. Let's go. But yeah, man, it was nuts. And like, I think the field we used was the Predators field, if I'm not mistaken. Like, we used our walls and dasher pads, but then I can't remember if it was Cleveland's. I don't know if we actually paid for Cleveland to have their field shipped down, or was it Orlando? I think it may have been Orlando because of McMath's relationship with the guys that own the Predators at that point.
That would kind of make sense too, because people need to remember too. And if you're only technically a newbie to the AFL, back then the league was very high on promoting the league, and if there's a possibility of maybe getting an ownership group or a potential ownership group, you have exhibition games wherever they could, so they could possibly get these new teams in future seasons. So.
Yeah, I mean, if you think back to I think it was the barnstorming season in what, 88 or 89?
89.
89. Where the league didn't have. We had 4 teams in the league, but we didn't have home venues. I mean, it was almost like, if you think back to, the 2001 season when Leslie Alexander gave up ownership of the Thunder Bears, but the league wanted to keep a team in Houston for some reason. And they're like, but we have no place to play, but we're going to keep you there. And man, if you ever get a chance to talk to Troy Stelly or Chris Pomerantz.
Okay.
If you can ever find Troy Stelly or Chris Pomerantz, they were the 2 equipment guys. Goody would probably know where they are. I know Troy's in Texas, and I think so is Gov. Gov's in Houston, that's right. And Troy's like in the Austin area.
It's possible.
It's
possible Jerry Trice might know.
Yeah, probably. I'm sure. I know Jerry would know. I know Coach would know.
Yeah.
But those 2 guys, I mean, they were the equipment guys for the Thunder Bears their barnstorming year. I'm betting like Troy and Gov are probably full of stories from the nightmare of that season, because that was, I know for a fact, that was not fun for them. God, man, you bring man. That's a long time ago, dude.
I know.
He's bringing back some. I'm diving deep into the memory warehouse tonight, man.
What I wanted to know, you're talking about, and as I said, I said, if I can learn one new thing about anybody working in the AFL, I think you told that, you let everybody know now that New Orleans had 3 jerseys. At any point, did Mickey Guidry say, no, I want to wear this jersey? Or was it only up to you guys?
No, it was up to me.
Okay.
Not you guys. It was up to me.
Okay.
Mickey had no say-so over nothing. Mickey wasn't even there half the time because, he got married. And like, Mickey missed like 3 games of that season because he got married and went on a honeymoon with his wife.
Mm-hmm.
And then, he missed 2 games for that. So he missed a game for the wedding and then missed a game for the honeymoon. So Doug Freeman was our quarterback. And I can't remember who was backup. His backup was some
There
kid
were a
from the
few.
Midwest. That's all I can remember.
Keaton Morales and Wiggins also that year. Who threw passes. So.
Okay, yeah. Was it Danny Keaton, I think it was?
It was, yes.
Yeah. I remember him, and Brian Wiggins, I think he played a little bit of quarterback before going to play for the Patriots there in New England there for a little while. Pre-Belichick years, pre-Parcells years, I think.
So what happened?
He was a good dude too, by the way.
What happened to these jerseys? How many times did you wear each of these jerseys? Because I'm a uniform guy, and I'm curious to know. Did you have a chance to wear every single color jersey that year, or because you guys wearing a burnt-ish orange or whatever color orange you called it?
No, that was definitely not burnt orange, Tim. That was orange, buddy.
Okay.
So we're
not talking Tampa Bay creamsicle orange, are we?
A little bit darker than that, but not much.
Okay. Albany Firebirds orange.
So Albany Firebirds orange, yeah. Okay. So our colors were officially sunset orange.
There you go, sunset.
Moonlight white and midnight navy.
There it is. Okay.
And so, yeah, and so kind of like I said, Keith kind of left it up to me as to decide the colors, and nobody ever complained about our uniform choices, because the crazy thing is that with as goofy as our logo was on the helmets with the crescent moon and the star and everything, and the name, which, by the way, like, if you're going to start a professional sports team, don't ever name the professional sports team as like a mode of the day
or when you're going to play.
Because if you name it, because if you name it the night, it was the New Orleans night. Oh, it's the Knights, like Knights, like with the N-I-G, the Knights, like dude, N-I-G-H-T, like the night.
Yeah.
Like really? Like you name don't ever name, like, give your team name like, something powerful.
Well, they did.
Not the night.
They did. The future, as we all know, the future, the future franchise in New Orleans had probably one of the best branding ever when it came, with the voodoo for.
Yes.
So
a lot of great people prior, a lot of great people worked for that organization on the field. Pat O'Hara, Mike New, Kevin Porter, Derek Stingley. I mean, the list of names just goes on and on.
Exactly.
They had great players too. And the best logo. And I'm not just saying that because I'm from New Orleans, but actually, yes, I am.
So now we need to get, if possible, some of these home games. We got to see New Orleans in orange, man. I want to see that.
Yeah, I know. Let's see. I'm trying to remember. I know we wore, I think it may have been the game against Cleveland that we came out in. I think we came out in orange and white that game.
Okay.
I know there was one game where I did a navy on navy. There was.
I never monochrome.
Did.
Wow. And monochrome.
Yeah, I did navy on
monochrome earlier. That back in the early '90s was not much. You didn't see that all that often.
Yeah, and I did, and I did the Stormtrooper way back when too. I did white on white on white. As a matter of fact.
Wow.
I did Yeah, because I think our best, honestly, like I really did not like the orange jerseys.
Okay.
Like they were horrible. I mean, like they were just. Look, I grew up a Saints fan, and prior to the realignment, putting the Bucks in our division, like yes, I liked Bucko and Bruce. I liked the creamsicle and white, except when I saw it in person, and then it's just like kind of just turned my stomach, and like seeing like everything in our organization that like we tried to avoid orange in our organization as much as possible.
All right.
Like everything that we did was either navy or white. And really, like the navy jerseys the navy jersey and the white jersey were our two best ones, but we hardly ever wore the navy jersey. I think we only broke it out like one time at home.
Okay.
The rest of the time it was white. I think I did like an orange over white, an orange over navy. I did a navy on navy. I did white over navy, I think, at one point. Yeah, I did like navy, white, navy. I mean, like it was crazy. Like here is 1992. Nobody would think of this stuff,
Yeah,
but
alternate
here we
jerseys?
were.
Exactly. Alternate jerseys
Yeah,
did not exist
yeah.
back then.
Yeah, it was just crazy. Like somebody had the forethought to like, because our three colors were so prominent, and we, I mean, the colorway was, if you're looking, okay, so you're a uniophile, I'm a uniophile,
Mhm.
and so I'm big into aesthetics as well. And from like a color combination standpoint, you look at the colorways that we had with the night, and really nobody. Look, man, I got lucky in the fact that, so I got to work for the night in '92, and our colors were navy, white, and orange.
Mm-hmm.
Then I go to Milwaukee in 2000, and our colors are purple, teal, black, and white.
Yep.
Come on, man.
Yeah.
Then in Tampa Bay in 2001, navy, gold, and white. Then I go to Green Bay in '03 in the Blizzard's first year, and with the stop in between, I was briefly with Macon in perform with the Green Bay, and you look at Macon's colors, and that was like
blue and gold,
like dark Vegas, like dark Vegas, powder blue, black, white, right? And then in Green Bay we had green, silver, and white.
Yep.
Like I got so lucky. I got so lucky with some of the teams I work for with the colorways that we used. Now like the high school I'm coaching out here in South Carolina. I mean, our colors are purple and black. I'm like, heck yes, let's go. Like there's really cool stuff you can do with purple and black, man.
Yeah.
Purple, black, and silver is our colorway here at Darlington. And I'm like, let's go, because we could do so many cool things. I'm so glad I got to design our baseball hat this year.
What was one of the things that you wanted to do in '92? You really wanted to do, whether it was a change, whether it was an addition to what's something that you wanted to do that the team just said no?
Win a game.
Well, yeah.
That's the God's honest truth.
Yeah.
That's the God's honest. Like I had never been part of a losing season in my life, like even playing rec ball growing up, and to go through that season. I mean, I think the only other thing I would probably say is pay me more money than what I got paid.
Mm-hmm.
The rest of it I wouldn't change, but I mean, yeah, to win a game and make more than I worked for the night for 12, 14 weeks. I got paid $500.
Yeah.
So basically, for all intents and purposes, I was a paid intern.
Yeah.
But to be 19 years old and work for a professional football team at home, and thinking that I'm never going to be able to work for the Saints, I'm like, this is as close as I'm going to get. I may as well take it. I mean, yeah, that's the only two things I'd be really first and foremost is actually win a freaking game.
Yeah.
And then, if I got paid a little bit more, my social life would have been better when I was 19. maybe girls would have liked me if I got paid for drinks at the bar, but instead the players paid for it. But anyway,
Of the 5 road games that you had that year, and I know you have a story about Orlando, but of the 5 road games that you had that year, what is the one that stands out the most? Charlotte, Tampa, Albany?
No, I think Tampa and Albany. Okay, let me start with Albany first.
Yeah.
So we go to upstate New York, play the Firebirds, and it just so happens that House is from upstate New York, and he has friends. So we went out, I went out to dinner with the coaching staff that night. And like, if you've ever met Walt Hausman back then, now Walt in his later days in arena ball, lost a lot of weight because he had physical problems relating to his playing career. Right. Mm-hmm. But Walt was a big guy because Walt was an offensive lineman. And so if you think about offensive linemen in the late 80s, early 90s, and run heavy outdoor, run heavy out of the NFL and the USFL and World League, like these are some big dudes. So imagine, my semi-fat self in the back of a cab next to Walt Hausman, Ken Meyer, and Brian Gardner, and this guy, Joe Impastato, who was like our video/ops guy. And so the five of us pile into a cab and we go to this Italian restaurant in the middle, like in some place in Albany. I can't even remember the name of the damn restaurant, but I just remember like it was a really, I just remember that dinner and then going out and then getting decimated by the Firebirds the next night at the Pepsi Center. But I digress. Tampa Bay was crazy because I think we were the home opener for them in '92. This is the year after they won their first Arena Bowl.
Right.
And so walking into what was then the Florida, now the Trop, but the Florida Suncoast Dome.
Yep.
Walking into and just for clarification's sake, like I am a lifelong diehard baseball fan. I got real fortunate in the fact I got to work in baseball as much as I did, professional baseball as much as I did. I get to coach it now in high school. But walking into the Trop and knowing that it was built specifically for baseball, because remember, the Trop was built to try to lure either the Cardinals, White Sox, or Giants to South Florida.
Right.
Back in the late 90s, right? Or late 80s, early 90s. So the stadium, like the cutouts in the floor are configured for baseball. All the locker rooms are configured for baseball. So the two guys who were the equipment guys, I can't remember the names for the life of me, but they worked for the Reds as their springtime jobs. But to make a little bit of extra money, they became the equipment guys for the Storm. So I talked like baseball with these guys, and they told me about what happens in Major League clubhouses and stuff like that. So we go into this building, and like I just look around, and I'm like, holy God, like this place can fit in the Superdome. Like it's tiny, but it's still big at the same time because there's nothing in there except the field. And like I just remember like how loud the crowd was and how they were into it and how close they were sitting, even in Thunderdome. And yes, I'll use that term Thunderdome lovingly, even though that was a crazy game, man. I think like we lost that game. Like we were up like 35-7. I got to go back and look at if somebody could find the stats of this game, I would love to see it. I think we were up like 35. This was the best game we played this season, by the way.
41-24, like we were up.
What was it?
41-24 at halftime.
Okay, so we were up 41. Thank you. We were up 41-24 at halftime. Okay. We're up 41. Now, mind you, like this is, I think, week 2 of the 92 season. So we just came off of if this is week 2 or week 3. If it was week 2, we had just come off a 20-point loss against Charlotte.
Yeah.
If it was week 3, we had just come off of. It was week 2. Okay. Yeah. So we had just come out. We played. We didn't play very well with Charlotte the week before, and that was a Sunday game, if I remember right. And then we turned around and then had to play Saturday down in Tampa. And so we're up 41-24 at the half. And I think we wound up losing like 75-72 or something like that.
64-60.
I know. 64-60. Yeah, that's it. Thank you. Yeah, so we gave up a lot of points in the second half. And I just remember like Grudes just throwing all over us. There was a guy that played for the Storm named Mark Zeno. Mm-hmm. And Mark Zeno played at Tulane University. And he's part of the reason why one of my favorite numbers is 11, because Mark wore, he was on the team at Tulane when we had Terrence Jones at quarterback. And Mark was like one of my favorite players, and I got to see him beat the ever-living bejeebus out of us over the top because we kept playing the wrong coverage the whole night on him. And Stevie Thomas, and I mean, all those guys, man. And the funny thing is, like, there was a guy that played for us named Thomas Monroe, T-Row. He wore number 26. T-Row, Tampa had just released him in week 1, and we picked him up in week 2 because we were short. We were short runner. We were kind of like short a wide receiver / running back type of player, and so we picked T-Row up. And like, I just remember him talking trash that whole game, and it really didn't help, especially the second half when Tampa came rolling back. But I mean, think about it, man. Like, this is the Storm's home opener in '92, and we're up 41-24 at the half, and we wound up losing 64-60.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that means that Tampa scored over almost 40 points in the second half. It's like some teams, that's a game.
Yeah. Well, they blew you out by 18 in the fourth quarter.
Yeah. That's what killed us. Yeah. Our conditioning was terrible because our guys like to go out and party. Speaking of that, I got to tell you about Orlando, but go ahead.
Yeah. Well, I was going to say, you mentioned it before about certain things that can happen in the locker room and stuff like that. I mean, I guess it could depend on city to city and stuff like that, but this is the early days of the Arena Football League. But how crazy was this locker room in New Orleans?
You know, oh, God, I'm so glad that the statute of limitations on this stuff is all long gone, buddy, because they're talking over 30 years now. It was a little, it wasn't like out there like a Ebby Calvin Nuclelouche type of out there, but I mean, we had our moments.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, he got a cadre, he got a team of 20-somethings living in New Orleans for free and getting paid to play football. And there was a local bar called the Triangle West. It's still there on Jefferson Highway, right down the street from Mark Twain 2 Apartments, which is still there too. And our guys pretty much kept that place in business single-handedly that season. I won't name the player. Well, I don't know if he's ever going to hear this. So Doug Freeman was our backup quarterback behind Guidry, right?
Yeah.
So let's just say a personal issue prevented Doug from finishing the season with us in '92. I'll just leave it at that.
Okay.
It's really weird when, his wife flew to Denver and knocked on the door and dragged him out, kicking and screaming back to Denver to her kids. But anyway, you didn't hear me say that. Anyway, it was crazy, man. I mean, I don't know about how much I can talk about.
No, that's fine.
It that way.
No, I get it. And I always understand even though we're all in some way a part of the Arena Football family, we know stories. A lot of stories cannot be told in public. Whether you change the name of the innocent or the guilty to save to save face, so they keep anonymous. But I get, and I think everybody who's heard this historical series understands that. It's something that would come out in a book, and I'm sure there are many players. Yeah. If we had books galore, man, that everybody could write. So yeah, and I understand that. I understand.
So we had, we had a player almost miss a game because he fell asleep at the side of the pool because he was drunk and sunburnt and wound up being one of the best players in that game for us. That actually happened. So, and he came to the Dome. And you got to remember something, like Harahan's, on a regular day without traffic, Harahan's about 20, 25-minute drop in the Superdome. He hops in a cab and makes it into the Dome 5 minutes before kickoff. He has his name announced as one of the starters. Doesn't show up. We're like, where is he? He's not here. I go run in the locker room, pick up the phone, call the dude, and go, hey, dude, where you at? He's like, oh bleep. Yeah. Oh bleep. Okay, I'm coming. Like, he missed pregame meal and everything because he got trashed at the pool with girls and a bottle of Jack Daniels. And got sunburned, and he's about as red as red can be for a human being.
You have, and I think you've told part of this story before if everybody frequents the premieres of Arena Football TV on YouTube. But as everybody can see, Orlando, that last game in Orlando, which happened to be the very last game in Knight's history. Sorry, Knight.
Oh, God.
Not even I'm doing it. Knight history.
Yeah, Knight.
I mean, the team gets blown out, 62-8, but there's a lot more than what that score actually says.
God. Man, look. Okay, so that game was what? That was June of 1992, right?
July 90. Yeah,
July.
90, yeah.
July 9th. Okay, so July 4th weekend.
No. Sorry. Yeah,
Purposes,
sorry. End of July. It was July 31st.
Oh, July 31st. Okay.
Yeah.
All right, good.
You played
so
Orlando at home on the 11th, but this is the last game of the year.
Okay. And they killed us in that game too. And that was part of like a 3-game homestand in the division, and it was like back to back against Charlotte, Tampa, or Charlotte. I think it was Charlotte, Tampa, and Detroit. I think was in that homestand or something like that. Anyway, so last game of franchise history. We know the team's folding, possibly moved, whatever. Everybody's give a care is flipped to beyond the off position, and we're just ready to get the thing over with.
Yeah.
We still got to practice, because this is professional football after all. And something that was kind of unbeknownst to me at the time, we practiced in T-shirts and shorts and helmets that whole week, and our meetings in total were probably about 45 minutes because we pretty much knew we were going to get decimated by Orlando anyway, right?
Right.
So basically went into the game real, just super duper nonchalant. And this is how you know things are going to go bad for you. So we had an offensive defensive lineman by the name of Earl Thomas, or number 65, played at Jackson State. So they announce him in the starting lineup, and he runs out, and he's got both birds flying, telling people what to go do themselves. And I'm like, bro, you're going to get us killed. Shut up. He's like, I don't give a flip. So that's how that game started off. But, let's preface it by saying what happened the night before, because the entire team went out to the club the night before.
Right.
The entire team. I stayed in my hotel room because I was broke. And girls don't like me anyway. Didn't like me at that point. So I was very socially awkward, even at 19. And so the whole team went out, come back. They come back in the hotel. I don't know, somewhere like around between 1 and 3 in the morning. And pregame meal doesn't exist because the league owns us. So they're like just basically, bare bonesing the whole thing. Now we did stay in a very nice hotel. I think it was the Omni that's like right next to the old arena.
Yeah.
Super nice hotel. Like it was beautiful. Right. And I just remember like going into the arena, and, I was kind of a Magic fan because of Shaq and everything, and Penny and those guys. And so I walked by the Magic's locker room and everything and thinking it was like super cool. And go stand on that sideline, that tiny little sideline box that they had at the old building, and where a whole bunch of drunken, toothless people who live in Orange County who were drunk and stand on top of you and yell disparaging comments at you the whole game because you're not a predator. So that was fun. And that's about all I can say about that. It was, they dropped the champ. They knew, I guess they knew, they had a premonition that they were going to win the Southern Division Championship, because they dropped the banner on us in the middle of the third quarter.
Oh my God.
It's on. Yeah. Did you not? You were watching that game. No, you didn't watch that game. Okay. So if anybody decides to go watch that game, fast forward through to about the middle of the third quarter. And at some point, because they had to have Tampa lose to Detroit that night, I think it was.
Yeah.
And so if Tampa lost to Detroit, and it was kind of inevitable they were going to beat us anyway. So they dropped the banner and played "We Are the Champions," put spotlights up on the banner in the middle of the flipping game.
That's so disrespectful. I mean, you have teams these days that are complaining that players are dancing on their logos and stuff like that. And wow.
Okay, I'm going to say this, and everybody who's not an Orlando Predator fan will agree with me on this.
Yeah.
To this day, I respect the heck out of Ben Bennett. He's a really good guy. He's a very good football coach. He was one hell of a quarterback. But I hate that team that he's the head coach of right now. I hate that team in Orlando. I love the city of Orlando. I had fun when I lived in Tampa and got to drive to Orlando just for the hell of it. Look, I ain't never had a bad time in Orlando. And sports fans in Orlando aren't as bad as the ones in Atlanta. But I hate Predators. I hate the team. I hate that stupid logo, the claw guy. Welcome to the jungle. Jay Gruden for going there. My former roommate Shane Stafford for playing for him. I don't hate Shane. Shane's a good guy. Shane deserves a shot. If anybody's listening to this and wants to hire a head coach, you need to hire Shane. He deserves it. He's a great he's a great ball coach and a good dude too.
Yeah. And if anybody wants to listen to the interview that we did with him on this historical series, go back into the archives and check it out.
There you go. Shane was my roommate in Tampa along with Clint Hart in 2001 in Tampa. And two really great dudes, even though Clint always wore my clothes. And both of them, as soon as we get done at Tampa, both of them wound up going to the NFL. Shane had a cup of coffee with Cleveland, and Clint, played in the Super Bowl for the Eagles. So, not too bad of a career. He's living, they're doing great together. I mean, I'm friends with both of them on Facebook. So, even though I still harbor the resentment at Clint for wearing my clothes all the time, but that's neither here nor there. I had a Florida Gators t-shirt that Clint would always come in my room and take. I'm like, why are you wearing my clothes? Because I've got nothing else clean. That's not my problem. Well, I'll cut your hair for free. Okay. Trade off. But yeah, I mean, I'm so glad I worked in the Tampa side of the war on I-4. I'll always be eternally grateful to Tim for hiring me and letting me be a part of that series. But man, I could not stand going to that building. Oh God, I couldn't.
When you heard when it was finally said and done that the team was not coming back, I mean, you'd worked in being a equipment manager before, but being that this was one of the things that you had checked off on your list, how did you feel? Were you automatically trying to talk to the people that so you can try to get another job elsewhere, or did you? No,
because at that point I was still in college. I was very fortunate. My parents, early on in my education, took care of it for me. Mm-hmm. I was living at home with them, and they let me do this. I mean, my dad, God rest him, worked for Delta for 38 years, so that's how I paid for my road trips with the night. Okay. I didn't have to pay to fly. I just flew in my privileges. And my parents were they were really great. They were understanding, and they really, they were really proud of me for doing this thing. I was deeply disappointed because, I thought arena football could work in New Orleans if it was done right back then. And to have to go in, after coming back and getting decimated by Orlando the way we did, and to come back home that afternoon, I think we played down there on a Saturday. We come back on a Sunday, and Keith and I go straight over to the school, and we start boxing everything up to get put in storage because we don't know what's going to happen to it. And
it's tough. I can imagine.
Yeah. I gotta admit, Tim, this is the first time I've ever gotten emotional about it when I'm sitting thinking about it. It hurt, man. It really did. Being a fan of arena football and being a part of it in New Orleans, and I never thought I'd be able to get back to pro football again. Mm-hmm. And so I got away. I got away from it, and I went to Nicholls State for a semester in the spring of '94, and was a football manager there in between stints with the New Orleans Zephyrs, and never thinking I was going to try to, never thinking I was going to get back in, into professional football, and seeing basically our franchise rights transferred to Miami for the Hooters their first year in '93, and thinking, shit, that could have been us, still playing.
Yeah. Did you? I know you had your helmet. Did you take anything else?
I still had my zoo, but when I walked away, I had a couple of T-shirts. My brother still has a pair of shorts that I gave him, which is amazing, and he still wears them from time. I don't know if he wears them anymore. And just some of the collateral material, like we had a bumper sticker. It was an orange bumper sticker with navy blue writing on it that says "The Year of Fear."
Yep.
What the hell did that mean? I don't know. But, it was all over our collateral materials, and, I kept that, and I think the media got it at some point, and then I lost it all in Katrina. So, but I still have one of my footballs, too. I still have one of the Spalding Iron Man footballs.
Yep.
So,
like I say, even though they only used the Spalding balls in 91, they had so many of them, they had to use them in 92 anyways, right?
Yeah. Yep. So I think we use them in practice, and I think we use them in the games. So, but yeah, I know I have a Spalding ball at the house. I know that.
So thus concludes part 1 of the episode with Steve Smith. And as I said, it's very extensive, but he is able to give so much detail and inside information to what he's able to do with the teams and stuff like that. And to be honest with you, the one tidbit that he mentioned about the New Orleans Knight and how many uniforms that they had, I did not even know that part. So that was something new to me. And as I've always said, if I'm able to learn something new in every episode, then I'll be very happy with the episode itself. So again, stay tuned for the second part of this episode. If you happen to miss any of our previous episodes, you can head over to any of the podcast aggregates that are located on the net, including if you head over to SoundCloud. That's where we usually host these things for a couple of weeks. But there are also other places where you can catch up, and those other places include Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, and the audio version is also over on YouTube. If you have any questions, comments, or concerns, or want to suggest anybody to come on future episodes of this historical look back at the Arena Football League, please email us at aflrewind@arenafan.com. So please stay safe, try to stay healthy, and do what's necessary, even if it does mean wearing a mask, even though you may not want to. But we will all get through this and be able to get together once again in the very near future. So for everybody here at AFL Rewind, I'm Tim Capper. Watch the rebound off the net.